Hello, I'm Yerevan. Welcome on board the Eastern Express. And as always, I hope you enjoy the journey. Ever tried negotiating when the other side wants to make changes to your backyard? Well, this time around we unpack the peace plan that might just redraw borders. In the latest episode of Can Neighbors Actually Get Along?, starring Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev, nothing is really as it seems, and the conclusion still remains an open question. A pressing concern for Yerevan is the casual irredentism floating around Baku's PR circles, those who charmingly refer to over 60% of Armenian territory as Western Azerbaijan. Is that good breeding ground for settling a decade-long conflict? And what does it mean for the political future of Nikol Pashinyan? Let's take a look at the latest report to find out more.
Armenia's Syunik province faces an escalating threat as Azerbaijan intensifies its territorial ambitions. Seeking an unimpeded route to its exclave of Nakhchivan, Baku aims to establish a so-called Zangezur corridor through Armenia's southern borderlands, with Azeri President Ilham Aliyev saying it will be established whether Armenia wants it or not.
Azerbaijan still demands unimpeded passage from its mainland territory to the exclave of Nakhchivan through Armenian territory. So Baku wants no Armenian presence or minimal Armenian presence on this communication, no checks on the border, no controls or any customs things going on.
This, combined with recent joint military drills by Azerbaijan and Turkey near Armenia's border, makes Yerevan uneasy to say the least. Since 2022, Azerbaijan has occupied over 200 square kilometers of Armenian territory, emboldened by Turkish military support and muted international response. Later in 2023, Azerbaijan launched its offensive against the separatist Nagorno-Karabakh region, regaining control of it and forcing a mass exodus of ethnic Armenians out of the mountainous area. Yerevan is of the opinion that Baku might want to use the current conflict between Israel and Iran to finally make a move on the southern Armenian province, and Armenians living in the Syunik province share this fear.
There is a certain fear of Azerbaijan attacking again. It's normal for people to be scared. Given the recent events in Karabakh and what the president of Azerbaijan has been saying, there is this feeling of fear.
The Armenian National Committee has called on the international community, including the OSCE, EU and the UN, to intervene and prevent another Azeri expansion at the expense of the Armenian people and land.
And now let's zone in on the explaining portion of our show. As the next parliamentary elections approach with each passing week, the incumbent Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan finds himself increasingly cornered at home. Faced with criticism from both his political opposition and civil society, Pashinyan's 2026 bid to continue ruling hangs in the balance.
Once celebrated for his Velvet Revolution reforms, to many, Nikol Pashinyan is now a symbol of democratic backsliding. From curbing press freedom by drafting slander laws and persecuting journalists covering anti-government protests to ceding territory to Azerbaijan through a special border deal, Pashinyan's standing in the public eye is significantly lower than at the beginning of his term. Pashinyan's party, the Civil Contract, has retained influence over bodies meant to be independent: judiciary, electoral commission, public media, raising alarms about consolidation of power among international watchdogs. His treatment of political opponents has also worsened his popularity, as he threatened MPs with arrests during heated parliamentary sessions. Armenian opposition parties are also reportedly gaining popularity, as support for them now matches that of Pashinyan's bloc in some polls. With anti-government protests, opposition unity, and fears of authoritarian drift among the voters, Nikol Pashinyan's bid for re-election teeters on the edge.
And now, as always, it's time to take a look at the issue in greater detail. Armenia's constitution currently cites the 1990 Declaration of Independence, which naturally mentions reunification aspirations with Nagorno-Karabakh. Pashinyan reminds us that Armenia's constitutional court has already ruled the constitution clean. No hidden annexation plans, no secret basement maps of Baku in the Armenian parliament building. Still, he's game to amend the constitution if ordered. Meanwhile, Azerbaijan's presidential aide Hikmat Hajiev is positioning the so-called Zangezur corridor as the red carpet to regional integration. It is supposed to connect mainland Azerbaijan with its Nakhchivan exclave, effectively weaving through Armenia's south. Armenians cringe at the term corridor, but Baku insists that once the road is paved, it's like a magical gateway to prosperity for Armenia as well. Because if there is anything that makes financial analysts weep with joy, it's a sovereign state relinquishing control of its own territory in exchange for the promise of cheaper shipping rates. And let's not forget Pashinyan's Crossroads of Peace project, a grand vision to turn Armenia into the Switzerland of the South Caucasus, knitting together Turkey, Azerbaijan, Iran and Georgia through one seamless transit hub. It is ambitious, it is bold, it's the sort of infrastructure plan that you would normally pitch to the European Union, but hey, if you're going to dream, dream big. Armenia, the continent's next great truck stop. So, will the Minsk Group finally get the grace note of history written over its fading nameplates? Will Armenia's constitutional lawyers have to moonlight as constitutional demolition experts? Well, only time will tell, but the ending to this story might just not be positive for the Armenian Prime Minister. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Shahla Kazimova, lecturer at the Center for East European Studies, University of Warsaw. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, thank you for the invitation.
So, some Armenian sources claim that this unique province might be in danger. Would you agree?
No, it's difficult to say that about if you're talking about the escalation. It's not possible today because there argue of races about that Zangezur or Sunniks now strikes so much emotion today, and to understand this problem, it's important to recall the broader context. For 3 decades, the Nakhchivan Autonomic Republic was officially blocked from this mainland, I mean Azerbaijan, and following the 2020 war, I mean the Second Karabakh War, the sides Armenia and Azerbaijan signed agreement which provided to aim to unblock transitional roads, and it was signed in November 2020, and it's, as I said, it's very important for unblocking regional transportation roads. From Baku perspective, this would allow for safe, efficient transit for people and goods. It's both direction. For Azerbaijan, this so-called Zangezur corridor carries both economic and strategic importance. It would foster development in southwestern districts and reduce dependence on transit through Iran and open new export opportunities. And what's also important, it's part of a broader vision for regional connectivity, because it includes Turkey and Central Asia states in this regional, as I said, connectivity. So Azerbaijan does expect Armenia to fulfill the commitments from this agreement, which I mentioned from 2020. However, Armenia has refused to open and claimed that Azerbaijan is seeking extraordinary status of this corridor, but Azerbaijan firmly refused this interpretation.
So who would be, who would be in charge of this if there was a Zangezur corridor within at least such meaning of the word as the authorities in Baku would like to implement it? Then how would the question of control be resolved? And why would that perhaps be a problem for Armenia to the extent that they don't really want to accept it to the, within such framework as Azerbaijan has proposed, at least?
What's important to understand that from Azerbaijan is not proposing border revision. Of course, this issue of corridor is very alarming by opposition in Armenia, which tried to use it as a tool, political tool against Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. And another, Iran's position adds another layer of complexity. Tehran opposed the corridor because it risks losing in current role as a key regional transitional country. First, Iran would no longer be main connector between Azerbaijan and Nakhchivan. And also, second in importance, that the transport hub between Turkey and Central Asia country, of course, would diminish. What I mentioned about it, because some voices about, alarming of Iran alarming or opposition in Armenia alarming about alleged territorial ambitions by Azerbaijan. It's also, as I said, some tools of political fight. As I said, nowadays Azerbaijan is not proposing border revision, and what is very important, for example, when we speak in context of Zangezur corridor, this mention about the corridor was being removed from the current draft treaty to avoid further controversy. And I'm want to emphasize that meanwhile Armenia and Azerbaijan have made tangible progress in this process negotiations. Full formally occupied territory, Azerbaijani villages were returned, and about, as far as I'm not mistaken, 13 kilometers of the state border were jointly, what is importantly, jointly demarcated as part of their peace process. This shows that Nikol Pashinyan government appeared willing negotiation as well as Azerbaijan, but there are some forces that are trying to use this narrative against. I think that it's against Nikol Pashinyan and his faction.
So 2026 is actually the election year in Armenia. Do you think that by that time any peace agreement with Azerbaijan is likely, or will difficulties pertaining both to current issues such as the status of Nakhchivan, and the possible passage between Azerbaijan and its exclave, and also historical issues such as the lingering emotional baggage that remains following the change of status of Nagorno-Karabakh. Will these issues derail the talks and make it more difficult for Pashinyan to actually claim a diplomatic victory here?
Thank you very much for this interesting question, because it also helps us to understand that process that is currently out in the region. And if we step away from the media noise and political grandstand, we can see, as I said, despite this painful history that you mentioned, and it is possible to progress. Of course, it is great-rooted and long-lasting conflict. But unlike other countries, as we say, for example, now we're observing what's going between Iran and Israel, it has developed into prolonged bloodbath conflict. I mean, after 2020. But the obstacle, you say it was two obstacles. One of these was the dissolution of OSCE Minsk Group. But now I think it is no longer a matter of a dispute because both sides reach agreement on this matter. But
so isn't the big deal anymore? But the Azerbaijani authorities say Armenia needs to change its constitution because it does contain mentions of the Karabakh region. And now, given that the situation has changed, they say, okay, so if you leave it there, this is going to look like a territorial claim against what is our, Azerbaijani territory today.
It's great questions. I tried to tag this question as well, because the obstacles, the problem for constitutional reform in Armenia is sensitive, and from Azerbaijani perspective, if you want to understand the Azerbaijani perspective, you have to look at the preamble of the Constitution of Armenia that refer to the 1990 Declaration of Independence. Which in turn refers to joint decision of so-called reunification Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. And of course, Nikol Pashinyan, Prime Minister, Nikol Pashinyan tried to explain that international treatment should override domestic law. But if I'm not mistaken, there is some 5th maybe article of the Armenian constitution state that the Armenian constitution holds the highest law force in the country. In short, Azerbaijan want the peace based on not only the agreement with one political faction. You mentioned about this election that will be in Armenia, but Azerbaijani authorities want to sign some peace agreement based on a whole national agreement, and it's very important to use some issue that maybe further will be further dispute. So it's very important if we want to sign a strong agreement, as I said, not only with the faction of Nikol Pashinyan, but the Armenian states, and it's problem for Azerbaijan, as I said, because as you know, the opposition in Armenia, before backed by Russia, now openly says about reverse of current development, and they are not agree with current situation. So it's very important to sign this treaty agreement without any discussing disputes and such points.
Shakla Kazimova was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you.
And now we're moving on to Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you really don't want to miss. Ukraine's parliament has voted in favor of a bill that would enable Ukrainian citizens to hold passports of foreign countries. Dual citizenship isn't the only upside of the proposed bill, as the law would also simplify obtaining a Ukrainian passport for foreigners.
The country's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, still has to sign off on the bill, though it's seen as nothing more than a formality given the originator of the idea was Zelensky himself, submitting the bill last August. Until the bill is signed into law, the status of dual citizenship remains unrecognized by Ukrainian law. Not all foreign passports, however, are allowed in the new system, as holding a Russian passport or serving in the Russian armed forces would result in a loss of one's Ukrainian citizenship. As for foreigners who wish to obtain a Ukrainian passport, Kyiv still has to determine which countries will be granted that opportunity. The bill is also a way for Ukrainians born outside of the country to receive citizenship without having to go through a bureaucratic nightmare.
Russia's annual St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, or SPIEF, kicked off on Wednesday, gathering thousands of visitors in the Russian city. While the wider West still has its reservations when it comes to attending events organized by Ukraine's invaders, government officials from China, Burkina Faso, as well as Afghanistan's Taliban are already in St. Petersburg to attend the expo.
While Russian media outlets claim the event is expecting the arrival of some 20,000 attendees from 140 countries, only 92 countries are confirmed to be present at the event. Still, attendance has risen 5% from last year, signaling increased interest in cooperation with Russia among the countries invited to the forum. Russian President Vladimir Putin's schedule during the event will be filled out by meetings with delegates from China, Brazil, Indonesia, South Africa, and other countries in an effort to pitch Russia as a resilient, sanction-tested economy seeking diversified partnerships. This year's SPIEF's tagline, "Shared Values, the Foundation of Growth in a Multipolar World," signals Moscow's intent to showcase its pivot toward Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the BRICS bloc, as the West remains mostly uninterested in dealing with Moscow.
Belarus has launched a large-scale military mobilization and exercises along its western border with Poland, escalating tensions with its neighbors. The drills near the Brest training range involve an anti-aircraft missile regiment, with Belarusian officials stating the maneuvers simulate combat-like conditions.
While the anti-aircraft regiment conducts drills, Minsk reservist forces are being deployed near Belarus's borders with Poland and Lithuania. According to reports, at least 5,000 such troops have been deployed, with the Belarusian Defense Ministry stating they will, quote, refamiliarize themselves with shooting techniques. Despite Belarus's attempts to goad Warsaw, Polish defense leaders see these actions as a calculated response to NATO's presence nearby, part of a broader display of readiness and deterrence rather than an attack attempt. While no incursions into Polish airspace have been confirmed so far as part of these drills, the increased exercises and troop movements underscore Minsk's growing willingness to flex military muscle on NATO's doorstep.
And with this, we conclude this episode of Eastern Express. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.